Welcome to the Tea Time Podcast, where it's all about taking a few healthy minutes each day just for you, with your host, Sharissa Bradley.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tea Time Podcast. I'm so grateful that you are here, and I hope to share something inspiring with you today. I have an addiction to social media, just like anybody else, right? And I was scrolling through my Instagram the other day, and I came across this quote, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it ever since. And I was trying to figure out a way to share it with you guys. And it came to me last night with a conversation with my sister. So let me share the quote with you. It says, "Consider how hard it is to change yourself, and you'll understand what little chance you have of trying to change others." And it's anonymous. There isn't somebody I can give credit to. I actually saw it on an Instagram page, and it's kind of been blowing my mind for the last couple of days, and I don't really know why. So I've been trying to unpack it since it's been sitting on me. I figure there's something I need to learn about it. There's some lesson here, and maybe there's something you need to learn about it. And that's maybe why you're listening to this episode. And I wanted to talk today about how hard it is for us just trying to, worry about other people in our lives, change people in our lives. If you're a mom or you're a sister or you're a friend or you're a daughter or you're a husband, whatever it is that you may be, you probably care for another person enough to care about their well-being and want to help advise them in some way. And in that, we're not always necessarily trying to change the other person. Maybe we're trying to give advice or we're trying to help them. And in our minds, it's this good-natured trying to give somebody benefits if you know something that might help them. And all of that is good and well and with well intentions. So of course it should be received with well intentions. But if you have ever tried to give somebody advice that they didn't necessarily want, or that they were kind of fighting against themselves, then you'll know firsthand that that's not the way advice is received, even if it's well intentioned and you feel like, oh, I'm just going to tell this person how to help them with their diet or how to change something to make themselves feel better. And often what we find out is that people didn't want advice and they didn't want you to tell them how to change their life. They just wanted you to listen and say like, oh, I'm sorry that you're going through that, and have sympathy or empathy for them. And they don't necessarily want to change any aspect of their life. And that's a really difficult concept to grasp, especially for someone like myself who makes a living helping people change their lives. And this is something that I've battled ever since I opened my business about 2.5 years ago, that I have people who call me and they really are struggling and they really want to help themselves and they really want to do something. They got to change, they got to make a change, they want to feel better and they're ready to feel better. So they call me and they say, I'm ready to make this big change in my life. And I do whatever I can to help them. If you're ever in need and you're feeling like you're stuck or you're trapped and you don't really know what the next step is, that's where I come in. So feel free to make an appointment with me and we can talk about these things. I want to help people make these changes. The problem is that not everybody actually wants to change. And this is something I really struggled with when I was helping people on a day-to-day basis really work through their issues. And what I would find is that most people wouldn't implement the changes. They enjoyed that 1 hour, 1.5 hour time that we talked about the changes that they could make to see the most benefit in their lives. But then upon talking to them a week or 2 weeks later, find that none of them had implemented any of the changes. And I would get so frustrated and I would take it so personally, like, I told you how to make your life better and you didn't listen to me and now you're going to get worse, and somehow maybe I'm even trying to take responsibility for that. And that's awful. That's not a good or fun place to be, especially if you're trying to help somebody. And I can see how this would relate in family situations with a spouse, perhaps, if you were trying to change your diet or your lifestyle and you didn't have the support at home that you were wanting. So you do and make all of your best efforts to try to change that person's opinion. And no, we have to eat these healthy foods because there's pesticides and there's GMOs, and like you make all the most convincing arguments that you possibly can. And still the other person isn't really willing to budge or make that change, or even making a change in an idea or whether or not they agree with things. And this can be incredibly infuriating, especially if you're, responsible for that person's life and you just want them to do better. In my case, my husband is the main provider for our household. And when he doesn't take care of himself, I get worried. Like if he gets sick, who's going to help take care of my family? And how am I going to make all of that work? So that becomes like a burden, almost like this stress of, if I don't take care of him and I don't make all the meals and he's not eating and doing these things properly, then at some point I'm going to suffer for it. And I definitely think about my children in that way with making changes and trying to help them in any way that we can. But what it really comes down to, and what it all boils down to, and why I think this quote from this week has really been resonating with me, is that it's so difficult. It's incredibly difficult to even make changes for ourselves. And I wrote an entire chapter in my book about this because it is, in my opinion, one of the hardest things that we have to do is make changes in our habits or our ritual, because we do the same things over and over and over again every single day, and our body is used to it and our brain is used to it, and we understand what to do after we put our left foot forward, we put our right foot forward, and we go through our life this way. And as soon as you decide, I'm going to make a change, your brain immediately puts on the brakes and says, we're not changing anything. Everything is working exactly perfectly fine. I know all of the steps. There's no reason to change the dance at the last minute. We're doing life perfectly fine. Why would I want to make any adjustments? And then it becomes this struggle, this fight between your brain and your body and wanting to make this shift in your life so that you can live longer and have these, healthier, better outlook on life. And you're still kind of having to battle yourself. That is a very difficult thing to do. You're basically arguing with your own brain to make changes for your own life. And that is a very difficult thing on its own, just to change for yourself. And then to go and tell someone else after you've made the change, this is the best thing to do, this is so great, you got to do this, it's so much better for you, etc., etc., that actually doesn't do anything to change that person's brain function. They still have to have that fight with themselves, that battle to make a change. Your arguments, no matter how valid or strong or amazing or truthful they are, you can't change someone's mind. They have to want that thing enough for themselves that they're going to do the changes and make the changes and fight that battle with the brain. And I really want to put this image in your head of what this scenario looks like. And we all do it. But I want to put it in a simpler context. So say you're at a restaurant and you're doing super good, like maybe you're doing Weight Watchers or you're doing some kind of point system or you're counting macros and you did exactly everything right all day long and it was perfect on the spot and you're like, yes, I am killing it today. I'm amazing. Like give yourself props, celebrate the little wins, celebrate every meal, all of that. Yes, okay, amazing. Except when the dessert cart comes through and then that little voice in the back of your head goes, but you did a really good job today and you stayed on your macros and we don't always have cake for dessert. So it's a special occasion, right? We're out to dinner, we're celebrating, I had a great day. This is this like really crazy manipulation in your brain because the brain doesn't want to make the changes. It doesn't want to make the shift. It's been driving the same exact highway for 50 years. Imagine you're like old, Clint Eastwood grandpa on the lawn yelling at the kids, like, get off my lawn, right? With his big old shotgun. This is how stubborn your brain is about making changes. So it will go through all the trouble to make the arguments for you. And you'll be sitting there fighting with yourself in your brain. And this happens so subconsciously. And maybe people don't even recognize that it's happening. And maybe you kind of have this little, like, I want that cake, but I know it's not good for me, but I deserve it. But I've been working so hard and I really don't want to screw it all up. But really, is one little cake going to screw it all up? And this goes going on, right? And maybe it's even happening when you're like trying to tally up the bill or you're, just counting your macros or adding your points in or whatever it is. And you're trying to justify and make the justifications for this dessert. This is our brain refusing to change. And especially refusing to change on things like eating less. Like that completely goes against our evolution. It goes against human, like human evolution. I don't even know if I can top that wording. We are meant to consume calories when we have the opportunity to consume calories. We're not used to having all of this, rich food around all the time. Our bodies haven't adapted to having food accessible at all hours of the day. We're still used to having to forage and go long times in between meals and eat fat and kind of have this intermittent fasting naturally. And that's not what we're doing now. And our brain hasn't adjusted to that. It's still understanding that we need to get as many calories as we can because it's for survival. It's our human existence. We need calories to survive. So that's going to be a really strong argument when you're trying to tell yourself to eat different things or eat less of things or avoid eating things that you really love. Your brain is going to fight against you and say, we want those things. Give me that thing. And it's very difficult to make that change. So anytime you're trying to think of like, hey, I want to, help this person out or make these changes for my spouse or make these changes for my kids, and they fight you and they're battling you, it's not just a battle towards you. They're battling themselves so much harder. And you can kind of put yourself in their shoes by imagining that scenario. I mean, how many January 1s have you woken up and thought like, I'm going to go to the gym every single day for a week? And then you set the alarm and the alarm goes off, but you make some kind of an excuse like, oh, but I did have to wake up in the middle of the night to pee. So I'm not as rested as I would have been if I didn't have to do that. So I'm going to try this again tomorrow when I get the adequate amount of sleep so that I feel the best that I possibly can. And that doesn't really help us, right? We're like now battling ourselves to not exercise, which is also healthy for us. But again, why would we make a change if it's not hurting us to not exercise, right? Our brain is thinking, I've been driving the same highway. I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what time to wake up and what time to eat breakfast and all of these things. Why are you trying to change something? We have this good thing going. And I think if you put yourself in that position of understanding the argument that we even have with ourselves to make changes, I mean, holy crap, even just like waking up an hour earlier, or today I wanted to do 12 sun salutations. I thought, okay, I'm going to get up. I've been getting up anyways. I have this energy in the morning. I'm going to use it. I'm going to do 12 sun salutations. You know how many I did? Not 12, maybe five, because I was the one holding myself accountable. And it was something new that I hadn't done before. And there was nobody there to tell me like, no, you have to do 12. If you don't do 12, you're a failure. So I did 5, and that was what I did. And that's what was happening. And hey, I'm celebrating that I did any at all. Like, hey, yay, I started a new habit. And even though I didn't complete it, I did some of it, I guess. But it's very difficult to make the changes. The entire time I was doing it, trying to count up to get to 12, I was thinking the whole time like, oh, well, I'm getting a little warm and like I'm getting sweaty. And well, I mean, one more, I don't really need to do 12. I already feel like I exercised. Like I'm loose, my muscles are stretched. Great, I'm done. This is awesome. And that was it. And I was done. So even someone who's telling you like, hey, it's really hard to change and you can change yourself, but try not to change others. I am struggling with this as well all the time when I'm trying to make my own changes in life. So I think if we can kind of put that in perspective and say like, well, if it's this hard to change ourselves, then it's probably almost impossible to change someone else. And that's not to say like give up, and that's not to say don't help other people or don't try to help other people, because a lot of people get to a point in their life when they're ready for help and they're ready for suggestions and they'll ask you. And the best way to ensure that happens is to live the best version of your own life. And if you want to help change somebody's diet and you want to convince somebody that eating healthier is better for you, then you eat healthy and eat as healthy as you possibly can and feel great and live a good, healthy, energized, full life. And when people start to notice that you're feeling amazing, then they're going to ask you like, what did you do? How did you get healthier? How did you lose the weight? And that's when you have the opportunity to change somebody's mind, when they've already seen it, right? As unfortunately, we don't walk around this earth with a lot of blind faith, and we don't just say yes, like, oh yes, as soon as you tell me that this is the right thing I need to do, then I'm going to do it. And we have every reason not to, and we have every reason to be skeptical of people who are telling us or trying to sell to us. But what really works is leading by example and actually showing people the way through yourself. So for me, in my house, I have celiac disease. I know I've told you this before, but when I first found out, I was the only person in my house that cut out gluten because I was the only person in the house that had a problem with it. So I cut gluten out of my diet, and about 6 months in, I cut gluten. I asked my husband to stop eating gluten because he was, I think, reinfecting me. Like I was getting sick from being around him, like in our bed, from his sweat and maybe from saliva. I don't really know, but I was having these flares. And it was really bothersome. So I asked him to, not eat that around me or not eat it in the house. Eventually we cut gluten out of the house, but it took a long time, and it actually took me feeling a lot better for everybody else to see, like, oh, maybe I could feel better too. And it also took my husband like cutting those things out when he was at home because we didn't have it in the house, and I was preparing meals that didn't have any gluten in them or any dairy. And when he was going out for lunch or with friends, he was actually getting sick from the meals. So I really didn't even have to do anything to change his mind. He changed his own mind by realizing his own health was being affected by these things as well. And it wasn't just me telling him all the time, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. And he was able to make that change. And because of that, he has been gluten-free and soy-free for about 2 years now and is feeling better than he's ever felt in his life. Like he is, getting younger. His body's looking younger. He's feeling younger. He has way more energy. And I didn't have to force any of that. And even if I had tried to, it would have been a real challenge. And instead, it kind of came up on its own with him starting to feel better. And as much as I'd like to sit here and tell you, this is how you have to tell people how to change their mind, it doesn't work. We're barely capable of making changes ourselves. And I'm being probably pretty generous by saying barely capable. It's something that entire fields of study focus on. There's an entire section on Amazon on books about habits and routine and morning routines and how to make these and create these long-lasting, successful day plans and calendars and things like this. Like, we are not good at it on our own. We need all of these tools to help us, force us, make us change. So it is likely to believe that it isn't possible really for us to make someone else change. And anytime that we do that, anytime that we push someone to believe what we believe, it ends up pushing that person away, right? Because we kind of turn them off. Like, oh, just because I don't have the same views as you, like, doesn't mean I'm not a good person. So just, try to help people when they're ready to be helped. And if you're getting frustrated with this, if you're getting frustrated with people not changing, and you're asking and you're caring and you really want people to take care of themselves, and it's coming from a loving place, of course it's coming from a loving place, but it doesn't always get received that way because it kind of comes off sometimes as judgment. And like, you're judging my food choices and you're telling me what I'm doing for myself isn't good enough. And that's a really hard place to be at too. So if we can kind of take a moment to look at other people's perspective when we're trying to change them and realize, like, oh my gosh, this is nearly impossible to do. And then maybe, have a little bit more compassion for people, but also learn that really the only way we can make any kind of positive change or any way we can make any kind of, steps towards changing other people is to just do those things ourselves. And if you're going to recommend something for someone else, make sure it was, from your own experience. I felt better when I did these things, and maybe that would be helpful to you too, rather than telling someone like, you should do this and you should do that and you have to stop eating this and stop eating that. That comes off as really judgmental and kind of harsh for someone who's already probably scared and not feeling well and worried about their own things. So, I guess that's all I really have to talk about today. And I just loved that quote. I'm going to tell you one more time just to kind of close out with it. So it's, consider how hard it is to change yourself, and you'll understand what little chance you have in trying to change others. Well, I hope that helped you today in some way. If it did, leave me a comment and I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for spending your tea time with us. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Living well and shining on what you're about. of me inside out. So take the time and love yourself. Take your plans off of the shelf. 'Cause for all you love, with all that you do, don't forget to love you too.